And 4 princesses, daughters of the 89-year-old King Abdullah, are alleged to have been singled out for extreme treatment.
It all began in 2014, when the ex-wife of King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia protested outside the Saudi embassy in London, demanding the release of her 4 adult daughters who had been imprisoned on their father's orders. As they say, children are gifts from God. However, what prompted their father, whom the members of the public viewed as a lover of freedom and a human rights activist, to turn his daughters into prisoners? The sisters' circumstances in Saudi Arabia were dire. They were starved, humiliated, and anesthetized. What fate awaited the 4 Saudi princesses? Did they eventually become released? Were they truly his daughters? 10 years later, the whole truth has finally come to light. How did the king's subjects, who once idolized him as a perfect and kind God, view him after the revelation? Keep watching to find out. Background check and early marriage. King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz Al Saud was viewed as a reformer within his family. Still, his actions frequently depicted him as an authoritarian. His treatment of his daughters contradicted his public image as a modernizer. According to history, Abdullah ruled Saudi Arabia for 10 years, amassing significant power and wealth with an estimated fortune of $15 billion. It is believed that the king lacked nothing and never looked malnourished, nor did his wives. Throughout his reign, he was celebrated for initiating groundbreaking reforms that improved women's rights, making him the most talked about king in and outside his kingdom. For instance, he permitted women to join the Consultative Council, marking a significant step in their political participation. This, in turn, helped to increase the number of women in politics and reduce apathy as more people began to see the need for active political participation. He also opened pathways for women to access quality higher education, empowering them to pursue careers and knowledge previously denied. For the majority of them, who were raised believing that empowerment and education were exclusively for men, it was like a dream that they never wanted to wake up from. Abdullah also increased women's employment prospects in previously unattainable fields, which improved their contribution to the economy and added value to them. Although many of the most visible changes in women's rights occurred after his rule, Abdullah's contributions were instrumental in laying the groundwork for these advancements. His policies were a turning point toward greater gender equality in Saudi Arabia. It was later rumored that, growing up, Abdullah witnessed some of his female friends who went through gender inequality and became determined to change that in the future. However, this progressive image was undermined by his actions. Abdullah's approach reflected more traditional and restrictive values within his family, which directly conflicted with the reforms he championed nationally. This duality defined his legacy, blending elements of reform with authoritarianism. Abdullah was born on the 1st of August, 1924, as the 10th son of King Abdulaziz, the founder of Saudi Arabia. His mother, Fada bint al-Shuraim, was a member of the Al-Rashid dynasty, a historical rival of the Al-Saud dynasty. The Rashidi dynasty, or the House of Rashid, was a historic Arabian house or dynasty that existed in the Arabian Peninsula between 1836 and 1921. Interestingly, Abdullah served in several high-profile political positions during his adult life, including Deputy Defense Minister, Commander of the Saudi Arabian National Guard, Mayor of Mecca, and de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia before taking the throne. During his reign, Abdullah maintained close relations with the United States and the United Kingdom, buying billions of dollars worth of defense equipment from both states. He took 4 of his daughters against their will, having fathered them with Al-Anud Fayez, a Jordanian noblewoman and former Saudi royal, whom he married when she was only 15. At the time of their marriage, Abdullah was 50 years old. Initially, Fayez was never in support of this marriage because she believed Abdullah was old enough to be her father. Their union was more of a forced marriage than a contented marriage with mutual understanding. So Fayez's marriage to Abdullah was more of an arranged one by her family as part of cultural and traditional practices. In the Middle East, royal and powerful families frequently still use arranged marriages to secure political or family rights, preserve social standing, and fortify alliances. The cultural and societal norms common at the time when young women were frequently married to older, powerful men in arrangements that put family interests ahead of individual preferences, are reflected in her marriage. At their marriage, King Abdullah was already deeply entrenched in the complexities of royal life. His household was not like an ordinary man's. He had several wives and an ever-expanding family. By then, he was married to nearly 30 women and had fathered 36 children, a testament to the scale of his responsibilities as a monarch and a patriarch. Life within the royal household was far from harmonious or interconnected. Each wife and her children were often confined to their palatial residence, whether an opulent palace or a secluded villa. These living arrangements ensured that the families rarely crossed paths or developed close relationships with one another. Such isolation might have fostered feelings of loneliness or rivalry, but it was a tradition deeply rooted in the kingdom's customs. Despite these internal dynamics, King Abdullah carefully cultivated a public image as a reformer and modernizer who sought to guide his nation toward progress. However, behind the gilded doors of the royal family, there was strict segregation and a deeply hierarchical structure, with even family members living lives largely isolated from one another. It was a paradox that defined much of his reign, a balancing act between tradition and the appearance of change. Abdullah's union with Fayez was blessed with 4 female children named Sahar, Jawaher, Hala, and Maha bint Abdullah bin Abdulaziz. Then, in 2003, the couple got divorced, and in 2015, Abdullah sadly passed away. Let us look critically into the experiences of the 4 princesses who were turned into prisoners out of their own will, and what prompted their father to take the action he took concerning them. I am sure you will love to know the role of their mother, Al-Fayez, in the whole issue, so stay tuned. Princesses but prisoners. According to the New York Timers, after their king's father drew his final breath, Princesses Sahar, Maha, Hala, and Jawaher had already endured nearly 15 years of isolation. Following reports from some loyal associates who, even in the face of trials and personal issues, managed to stay in contact through a secret cell phone connection, it all began when their mother, Fayez, fled to London in a desperate attempt to escape his oppressive control. The princesses were confined to the sprawling palace grounds in Jeddah, locked away in fortified buildings that stood like silent sentinels overlooking the Red Sea. Inside, their lives were a nightmare. Initially, Hala did not support her mother's actions because she became fond of her father and did not view him as the autocratic ruler that her mother painted him to be. But then, she will soon experience the truth. After her mother successfully eloped, Princess Hala and her sisters were forced to bear the consequences of their mother's actions. They whispered of being forced to take substances, starved, and denied even the most basic medical care, a cruel punishment exacted for their mother's act of defiance. The heavy security surrounding their prison ensured escape was impossible, their pleas for freedom swallowed by the palace walls. Their plight first came to light in the year 2014 when Sahar and Jawaher reached out to journalists in desperate rebellion. They shared harrowing stories of their captivity and suffering, hoping their voices would stir the conscience of the world. According to an anonymous source, Sahar had once led an active and fulfilling life before the imprisonment. She was a skilled skier and scuba diver, fluent in English and French, and she also enjoyed traveling. Additionally, Sahar was a dedicated artist who made beautiful sculptures and paintings with great passion. She believed art was the most effective means of communicating her thoughts, feelings, and ideas to the world without face-to-face interaction. She even sent pictures of her artwork to her father, Abdullah, as their bond deepened. One of her sculptures depicted a small bird trapped in an intricate cage, its head wrapped in a plastic bag. She also sent him images of her living conditions, including one of a large gray tower standing in the water outside her window, which she explained was used to monitor her. Sahar was imprisoned in the same building as her younger sister, Jawaher. The two sisters secretly obtained a cell phone, which allowed them to speak with their mother, Al-Fayez. However, they had lost all communication with their other sisters, Maha and Hala, who were held separately. This separation added to their emotional suffering. When their mother, Al-Fayez, learned of this, she became anxious to help her daughters. She asked a friend for advice on making the public aware of their predicament so that they could draw the attention of powerful and influential people who would later be crucial to their liberation. The cry for help. How would you feel as a mother if you were informed by a reliable source that your kids were kidnapped on their way to school? You would probably panic and look for a possible way to alleviate the angry kidnappers by doing their bidding to save the lives of your children, right? The four princesses' case was not one of kidnapping, but their mother, alarmed by the news, lodged a formal complaint with the UN, describing the abuse her daughters had suffered. In her letter, she explained that her daughters were subjected to severe mistreatment, regularly given substances, and constantly watched by armed guards. Hala, who was suffering from extreme anorexia, was denied medical treatment. The seawater near their residence was intentionally polluted with garbage and sewage, making it unusable for bathing, and nets were placed in the water to prevent them from escaping by swimming. These are grave violations of their basic human rights, Al-Fayez wrote. I managed to leave, but my daughters' lives are being destroyed more with each passing day. Princess Al-Fayez pleaded with the United Nations to address the plight of her four daughters, imprisoned by their father, King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia. Despite attempts to highlight their ordeal through media interviews in 2014, including descriptions of psychological torment, starvation, and living in inhumane conditions, international intervention was absent. The sisters accused their father of abuse and detailed their worsening situation, including threats, food deprivation, and beatings. Even as their conditions deteriorated, King Abdullah and President Obama met without acknowledgement of the sisters' plight. Sadly, their calls for justice underscored the challenges faced by women in a system without legal recourse. In an unedited interview conducted via email, Sahar, the eldest of the four sisters, disclosed that they were facing a vicious army that was headed by their half-brother Mitab, who conspired with their father and the deputy foreign minister to abuse them over the years. Some nurses from the royal clinic visited them in prison and, unbelievably, gave them injections of substances that made them agitated later. It was later discovered by Sahar, who tried asking questions about the injections. A certain doctor, before resigning, told her that he was given orders by their father not to treat them, but his conscience could not allow him to continue. He felt guilty each time he visited them to administer those substances to them. According to Sahar, his final words to her were, "God help you, you are living with monsters." They tried screaming for help, but unfortunately, their cries were met with silence. International leaders, powerful enough to demand justice, turned a blind eye to their misery. As the years passed, the princesses remained trapped in their gilded cage. The Red Sea continued its ceaseless rhythm beyond their prison, a cruel reminder of the freedom they could see but never touch. News of the four sisters started to wane a few years after King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz's death, and their mother was never mentioned again. Then, it was later rumored that Al-Fayez and one of the four siblings passed away. However, the news was from an anonymous source that lacked authenticity. The revelation. Although speculation and whispers filled the air concerning the four siblings, there was no concrete, detailed information, and it seemed as though the sisters had been erased from the public eye, and their existence was confined to the four walls of the palace prison. Coincidentally, amid uncertainty, after years of silence, in 2024, the horrifying reality of what happened to the four princesses was revealed by an unexpected individual who kept his knowledge about them secret for years. Who was this individual? What kind of relationship existed between him and the four princesses? And what did he have to say about their current whereabouts? Keep watching to find out. His name is Dr. Dwight Burdick, a medical practitioner who spent many years serving the Saudi royal household as their family doctor. In an unexpected twist of events, the doctor finally disclosed the full truth about the harrowing conditions faced by Princesses Jawaher, Hala, Maha, and Sahar in an interview with The New Yorker. In a nutshell, his revelations illuminated the severe hardships endured by the sisters during their prolonged captivity and the dark side of royalty known to only a few. According to the report, Dr. Burdick first relocated to Saudi Arabia from Texas in the mid-1990s, seeking an escape from the monotony of his hospital job and attracted by the promise of a substantial salary. Alongside his spouse, he enthusiastically accepted the chance to serve as a royal family physician, a position that offered financial and prestige benefits. His wife described this situation as God's miracle. Enthusiastic about their new surroundings, the couple immersed themselves in Saudi culture, even converting to Islam, and adopting the traditions and values of the country with sincerity. However, they remained oblivious to the darker truths hidden within the royal palace. It was not until the year 2008 that Dr. Burdick learned about the plight of the imprisoned princesses. He was shocked to realize this, and too surprised to say a word. One day, he was urgently summoned to Princess Hala's quarters with a troubling request to administer sedatives to her forcibly. Stunned by the ethical implications of such a demand, he firmly refused, which went against his professional principles as a physician. Determined to understand the situation and offer assistance, he sought permission to meet the sisters. What he discovered during these encounters was nothing short of horrifying. It was terrible. Princesses Hala and Maha were especially affected as they battled severe alcohol and substance addictions. These dependencies were not the result of personal choice, but rather stemmed from years of forced sedation and unrelenting trauma. Notably, the substances were made available to them and deliberately imposed as a method of control. The sisters were trapped in a nightmarish environment where cameras and listening devices monitored their every move. The constant surveillance left them in a state of unending fear and anxiety, eroding their mental health. Imagine living in a house knowing that hidden cameras are stationed at strategic locations. You would be afraid, right? Especially when you are unsure who is watching and why the person is watching you. Dr. Burdick observed that Princesses Hala and Maha frequently exhibited intense outbursts, with their frustration and despair often manifesting as aggressive behavior. In these situations, palace staff would routinely summon medical personnel to sedate the sisters, further perpetuating their dependency on medication. She greeted him with hostility during his initial visit to Princess Hala's quarters. In a moment of anger and mistrust, she attacked him with a knife. Despite this alarming incident, Dr. Burdick chose a calm and compassionate approach, refusing to retaliate or comply with the demand to sedate her. Instead, he engaged her in conversation, hoping to de-escalate the situation. This interaction left a lasting impression on Dr. Burdick, as he saw anger and profound desperation in her eyes. He realized that these women were not simply difficult patients, but victims of an oppressive system designed to strip them of their dignity and willpower. Although Dr. Burdick's ability to improve their circumstances was severely constrained, he resolved to provide the sisters with as much medical care and emotional support as possible. His primary focus became helping them overcome their addictions. He recognized that Princesses Hala and Maha required professional treatment to address their dependency on substances and their deteriorating mental health. Motivated to secure their freedom and restore their well-being, Dr. Burdick devised an ambitious plan. He proposed transferring Hala and Maha to a world-renowned rehabilitation center in California, known for its expertise in treating addiction. He hoped this move would begin their recovery, and their siblings, Jawaher and Sahar, might eventually join them. Unfortunately, his proposal was rejected by the royal court. Officials curtly informed him that the sisters would never be allowed to leave Saudi Arabia under any circumstances. Moreover, Dr. Burdick was warned that further attempts to pursue this idea would jeopardize his safety and that of his wife. The royal court's message was clear: helping the sisters escape their confinement would not be tolerated. Confronted with the power of the regime and the risks involved, Dr. Burdick reluctantly abandoned his plan to free the princesses. Nevertheless, he remained determined to assist them within the confines of their captivity in any little way he could, not minding the consequences. Over time, with his guidance and support, Princess Hala made remarkable progress. She managed to overcome her dependency on alcohol and substances, showing incredible resilience despite the oppressive conditions surrounding her. For the first time in many years, she imagined a life beyond the palace walls, where she might reclaim her freedom and autonomy. Dr. Burdick's involvement with the sisters was not without personal cost. The moral and emotional weight of witnessing their suffering took a toll on him, yet he remained steadfast in his commitment to their well-being. Though he could not secure their release, his efforts provided them with a glimmer of hope and a measure of dignity in an otherwise dehumanizing situation. The story of Dr. Dwight Burdick and the imprisoned princesses highlights the devastating consequences of unchecked power and the courage it takes to stand against it. His unwavering dedication to his ethical principles and his compassion for the sisters serve as a memorable reminder of the resilience of the human spirit, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. After their mother, Al-Fayez, raised global awareness about her daughter's plight in 2014, the situation for the four princesses took a dramatic turn. But was it for good? In retaliation for the unwanted attention, their captors began to abuse them even more severely. The sisters were sometimes deprived of food and had their water supply cut off for extended periods as punishment. This affected Princess Hala, who, according to Dr. Burdick, was caught drinking dirty water one evening in the backyard. Dr. Dwight Burdick, who still had access to the royal compound, took a big risk to help the poor princesses subjected to harsh treatment. He smuggled leftovers from the king's table to the sisters because he could not bear to see them suffer. These scraps became vital for their survival during their harshest moments, and they remained ever grateful to him for being supportive. The women were denied all forms of communication to ensure they could no longer seek assistance. They had no phones, internet, or contact with the outside world. Isolated and silenced, they were entirely at their father's and his guards' mercy. Dr. Burdick and his wife realized they could not help anymore as the conditions worsened. Threats to their safety forced them to leave Saudi Arabia and return to the United States. Before departing, they arranged one last visit with Princess Maha. The sight of her was devastating. Her hair had fallen out, her body was swollen, and her mental state was deeply disturbed. King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz Al Saud passed away in 2015. Even after his death, the sisters remained imprisoned. The king reportedly vowed they would never be released, ensuring their captivity beyond his lifetime. In 2021, Dr. Burdick learned Princess Hala had died from a chronic illness. 6 months later, Princess Maha also passed, though her death went largely unacknowledged. The fate of the remaining sisters, Jawaher and Sahar, remains unknown. Their mother, Al-Fayez, now in London, hopes she might see at least one of her daughters again. Despite years of silence, she refuses to give up. This story highlights the struggles women face under oppressive regimes, where even princesses are silenced. What can you say about the princess's plight? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Before you go, hit that notification bell on your screen to watch more of our videos. We hope to see you next time. Bye for now.